Welcome to Bittensor Weekly, your source of truth for everything happening in the Bittensor ecosystem. I am your host, and this is episode 14, recorded the first week of June 2026. This week, the biggest protocol change in months quietly went live on mainnet, and almost nobody noticed because the price cart was bleeding. The founding team flew to the Louvre in Paris. A regulated, physically backed, staked TAO product opened on its third European exchange, and the subnet that introduced conviction to the chain just shipped a piece of hardware you can buy. The story of the week is that the structural news kept shipping while the market kept selling. Let us get into it. Story 1. Conviction 2 is live on mainnet. On May 28th, the OpenTensor team tagged a new Subtensor release, version 3.4.0. The release contains a pull request titled, quote, mainnet deploy 5/27/2026. Inside that release, the second iteration of conviction. Here's what's actually on-chain right now. A cold key can lock alpha stake to one hot key per subnet, using a new extrinsic called lock_stake. Once locked, the position accrues conviction over time. The system uses two independent timescales, an unlock rate that decays the locked mass, and a maturity rate that governs how conviction itself ages. Both are set to a 90-day half-life. Locks are perpetual by default. Users can flip them to decaying with another new extrinsic. A few things to be very precise about. First, Conviction 2 is opt-in. There is no default auto-lock. If you do nothing, nothing locks. You have to actively call the extrinsic. Second, the first version of Conviction was removed in the same release, which is why some of the release notes mentioned disabling stake locking. That was about parking version 1 to make room for version 2, not about gating version 2. Third, one specific downstream consequence is currently turned off. The rule where conviction accumulation can flip subnet ownership, the so-called subnet king change, is disabled in the same pull request that ships conviction 2. The locking works, the accrual works, the most aggressive consequence does not yet trigger. We've been tracking this upgrade for every several episodes. As of the May 28th release, it is live. The question now is adoption. Are cold keys actually calling lock_stake? That is the metric to watch. Story 2. Proof of talk in Paris. The entire founding team showed up at the Louvre this week. On June 2nd, Ala Shabana, co-founder of the OpenTensor Foundation, delivered the keynote, Subnets, Signals, and Scale. Then later, on June 3rd, Bittensor co-founder Jacob Steeves, also known as Const, sat down with Nina Bembisheva, deputy editor and head of digital assets at Forbes, for a fireside chat titled Decentralizing Intelligence, the Unification of AI and Bitcoin. Then later, on June 3rd, Const joined Marcus Grachin of TauStats, Mike Grantis of General Tensor, and Chris Zechariah of Bitstarter for the Proof of Pitch finale. The signal here is the Forbes fireside. Const sat across from a deputy editor at a mainstream financial publication. Forbes is not a crypto outlet. That audience choice is deliberate. This is how a token becomes a known name to portfolio managers, repeat exposures in non-native venues. The conference itself ran a dedicated Bittensor programming day. Last year, Bittensor was a sidetrack at Proof of Talk. This year, it had its own stage. Story 3. Staked TAO walks onto Euronext Paris. On June 2nd, Deutsche Digital Assets and Safello listed the Safello Bittensor Staked TAO Exchange-traded product on Euronext Paris. The ticker is STAO. It is 100% physically backed by TAO, held in cold storage with a regulated custodian, and tracks the Kaiko Safello Staked Bittensor Index. Total expense ratio is 1.49% per year. To be precise about what changed this week, the product already trades on the SIX Swiss exchange and on Nasdaq
Nasdaq Stockholm. Paris is the third venue, not a brand new product, but Euronext is the second largest stock exchange in continental Europe by market capitalization, and any Paris-based investor can now get regulated, custodied TAO exposure through their existing brokerage account. Frank Schul, the Safello chief executive, framed it as a step in bridging traditional finance with digital assets. The volumes on these European products will stay small. What matters is the rail. Story 4. Emission block still awaiting on-chain proof. The emission block mechanism that Const announced for Subnet 104 was slated for early June. Per TAO stats today, Subnet 104 shows 0 recent transactions, 0 delegated stake, 0 buy-sell price impact, and 1,026 holders sitting on alpha tokens. That picture is consistent with Const's description, but it is the same picture we showed last week. We still do not have a clean primary source confirmation, a tagged release, an OpenTensor X post, or a Const statement saying the block has executed. Until we do, the status is scheduled, not executed. Story 5. The price. Per MEXC live data, TAO is trading at $193.87. 24-hour change is essentially flat. 7-day change is minus 23.21%. Market cap is $2.13 billion on a circulating supply of just under 11 million TAO. This is not a Bittensor-specific sell-off. The broader digital asset market is in its second straight week of Bitcoin exchange-traded fund outflows. TAO is moving with that tape. All of the structural news this week, conviction landing on chain, the Forbes fireside, the ETP listing, the hardware launch we are about to talk about, happened into a falling market. Now to the Subnet Spotlight. We spotlighted Targon several months ago, but Manifold Labs, the team behind Targon on Subnet 4, did something this week that earns the slot a second time. They shipped a physical product you can buy. On June 2nd, Manifold launched Targon Tower Pro. This is confidential computing hardware, 4 configurations, the flagship Tower Pro with the new NVIDIA 5090 cards at $57,500, plus RTX 6000, H100, and H200 variants. Each tower carries 8 NVIDIA GPUs and uses Intel TDX for trusted execution. RAM scales from 512 gigabytes up to 2 terabytes, depending on configuration. The mechanic that makes this interesting is something they call earning mode. When the box is idle, and most workstations sit idle a lot of the time, it routes the unused compute into Targon's inference network on Subnet 4 and earns TAO. This is the first Bittensor subnet I have seen vertically integrate all the way from the network down to a piece of hardware on a customer's desk.
Why this is the spotlight? Most subnets are software only and earn emissions from UMA consensus. Targon is now selling the picks and shovels, capturing a hardware margin and seeding network capacity with the same product. If even a small fraction of buyers leave earning mode on, Manifold has bought themselves a permanent, customer-funded, geographically distributed inference footprint. The risk is real. NVIDIA ships new silicon on a faster cadence than Targon can refresh SKUs, and $57,500 competes with cloud GPU rental at every price point. But this is the kind of business move that, if it works, separates the subnets that build companies from the subnets that build farms. One quick note. Also on June 2nd, Endure Network launched on Subnet 30, positioning itself as a competitive intelligence and risk analysis network. The story is single-sourced for now, so we are watching, not covering. Now to the alpha portfolio. 3 things to watch on Bittensor right now. First, watch conviction adoption. The mechanism is live and opt-in. The number of unique cold keys calling lock_stake is now a measurable on-chain signal. If serious capital actually locks, the subnets receiving that conviction get a sustained tail of holder commitment. If nobody locks, the upgrade is a feature without users. Either way, the data starts speaking next week. Second, watch the gap between structural news and price. This week was unusually news-rich on the upside. A protocol upgrade landing, a Forbes fireside, a new exchange listing, a hardware launch, and TAO still went down 23% on the week. That is a macro tape problem. Names with hard structural catalysts tend to lead off the bottom when Bitcoin exchange-traded fund flows turn positive. Watch the flows. Third, watch the emission block. The moment we get a primary source confirming Subnet 104 lost emissions on a specific block, that is the first real demonstration of enforcement on the new policy. Until that happens, it remains policy with no precedent. That is it for this week. Conviction 2 is live, the founders went to the Louvre, the ETP added a third venue, Targon shipped hardware, and the price kept bleeding into a brutal macro tape. If you found this useful, hit subscribe and ring the bell so the next episode finds you. I will see you next Saturday.